Hi, this is Bruce Rawles, and I'm talking with Susan Dugan again. And today we thought we'd talk about, per Susan's suggestion, lesson 303, which is The Holy Christ is Born in Me Today. And Susan has been recently studying this lesson, and I've just recently read it again, and Ken Wapnick's commentary in the Journey Through the Workbook, which is always excellent. And so why don't you go ahead and start in, Susan, on some of the things that you've gleaned from this. Or anything else you want to announce?
Yeah, okay. Well, we do want to talk about lesson 303, The Holy Christ is Born in Me Today, which has all these wonderful Christmas themes, and also echoes a lot of the themes in chapter 15, which was written at Christmas, and also kind of pulls in some of the themes from lesson 182, I will be still an instant and go home, and really focuses on stillness and the child within us all that is so, the two children within us all, the ego's child that is so frightened here and believes that it can never find its way home. And then meets us with this image of the other child, the memory of our other self, which comes to us as a little child so as not to threaten us in the condition we think we're in, and uses the Christmas story as a way of allowing that little child of our defenselessness, the child of our innocence and defenselessness that never took that tiny mad idea seriously. It kind of invites us to cradle that child at Christmas time, to be still an instant and return to the memory of that child, to be with that child. And I love the way it's as if we need to nurture that child. It's like it's appealing to our parental instincts, that child is the vulnerable one, although really we're the one that feels so vulnerable, the child that that Jesus represents, the Christ self, is invulnerable and knows it. But again, it's an example of the beautiful way in which Jesus meets us in the condition we think we're in.
As you're saying that, it also reminds me that it's an example of how, as we've identified so thoroughly with ego, we've got everything backwards. And we think that that the holiness of innocence that includes everyone is a vulnerable idea, and yet that's the only place that strength exists. So as you're saying that, I was like, well, yeah, it's another way. It's as our everyday thinking, we've got everything backwards, don't we?
Right. And it's all about all of these Christmas themes that the Course is using are really inviting us, ironically, in a season that is so loud and noisy and frenetic, in which we're all engaged in a marathon of trying to, that feels like a sprinted marathon most of the time, of trying to give, to sacrifice ourselves, to purchase literally love through buying gifts, through gifts of our time, through all of the ways in which we try to prove to others that we love them so that they will love us back, in a covert effort to try to earn the love back that we think we forfeited when we ran away from home. When we pushed the original love of God away, and decided to strike off on our own in this experiment of individuality, and then turned it around that God was noticed and was angry. I mean, we took it seriously because it was an impossible idea, and so we're constantly always trying to fill that lack, and it really is it's a very enervating activity all year long. But this time of year, it really rises to a ridiculous state that even us who are people who don't know anything about the Course and are not spiritual at all or whatever, are very in touch with how weary this makes them.
It's a pretty obvious over-the-top activity, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely, and if we're honest with ourselves, and it's never worked, it doesn't. I mean, it makes us. We end up resenting it. We end up feeling really tired and feeling really, inadequate in ways, and we're stretching ourselves financially and physically, and and then we're trying to also prove that we're having such a good time, and so we're all sugared up, and we're overindulging in things, and so we're not getting enough sleep, and all to prove that we're all joyful, and when really the only joy is in that here, because here is the world was really not made as a joyful place. It was made as a defense against the only joy there is, which is our uninterrupted union that continues with God, as we're speaking that we're now unaware of. The joy, the reflection of joy here is in that holy instant, and it only has to be an instant. Right. Ken Wapnick talks about it in his beautiful CD set, Watching with Angels, which is some of the imagery from this lesson 303, as just a nod to God. It's just taking a moment, within our frenetic activity, not to stop what we're doing, being normal, but to just to as we're doing it, take that moment within to cradle that Christ child within us, that defenselessness within us, which must also mean that we're cradling it within whoever we're in relationship at the time, and likely resenting, and projecting the reason that we're feeling so bad. This is always about, the theme is always forgiveness.
Right.
And we're not forgiving really another person, but that's where we start. That's how we go back to the mind, is we catch ourselves believing that someone else needs forgiving because they're such an idiot, That's
where the classroom starts, isn't it? It's always has to start with where we think we are, which is populated with the world of seeming others, and if we don't reconcile that by reeling in those projections and then forgiving ourselves for having made them, then all bets are off. And I like how you, oh, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was just going to say that you mentioned lesson 182, which I've found a lot of inspiration from lately, because I've been listening to it on this thing while I'm out for walks for a couple months now, because I haven't done an update on my phone in a way that would allow me to choose different music. So I've got Ken's commentary on lesson 182. I've been listening to over and over again. But fortunately, it's excellent, along with a little bit of Beethoven. So I've had very limited selections, but fortunately, they've been really good ones. And at 182, I think I've heard it enough times now that one of the take-home lessons from his commentary is, if we think that we're going to, make this work, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, but the whole idea is not to make us suffer, but to raise to our awareness the fact that our identity invested in this world and in this seeming separate self is suffering, and to minimize that suffering, to get out of the masochism habit, is really to admit that to ourselves. And that's the stillness and the silence that allows us to do that, where we very patiently and calmly look at the results of that investment and say, that has not worked, and choose again and make a different choice. And that's where that stillness and the calm comes in, to realize that there is another choice, and that peace is waiting for us 24/7, 365, and certainly in this season as well as throughout the year. Yeah.
Right, and I think that it is counterintuitive that we have to get in touch with the misery first. We can't go straight to the peace. And honestly, and even though, the Course kind of puts it in these steps of just of saying, well, before, lesson 5 being, I'm not upset for the reason I think, in lesson 34, I could see peace instead of this, and that, as the sort of mechanical steps that you take back to the mind, where peace abides. So you're questioning the cause of your upset, and we do that, but we also, and I think the more you really get deeper into the Course, and hit those defenses that are really buried in the different forms that they are personally for us, that, we come up against that, we butt up against that fear the unknown, of disappearing into the heart of God, that is so frightening to us, and the deep unworthiness that we feel.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we really don't believe that that's safety anymore, because we have bought the ego story that that's annihilation. And number two, we don't believe that we're worthy of it. You know, the guilt is so enormous. And so I think there's lesson 182 is so just spectacularly helpful, because it uses that imagery of children.
Mm-hmm.
And that vulnerability that we can all relate to. And it really invites us at a very deep level to get in touch with that child. You know, it's sort of the archetype of the inner child. Mm-hmm. All that frightened child. And if we can get in touch with that child within ourselves and begin to stop judging it, you know, begin to not only stop judging it, but cradle it, as the imagery in that lesson invites us to do. You know, I mean, first we have to sort of cradle the frightened child we think we are before we can even entertain the possibility of cradling the true self that is being, you know, offered to us. Mm-hmm. And so really we're inviting that the child of our real self in by opening, you know, by really allowing ourselves to feel our own vulnerability, right. And then opening it to that other child and joining with it, you know. And it will always result, and again, it can seem like a paralyzingly slow process, you know, because we talked about resistance a lot in these chats, but we're so defended against the answer, you know, which is now such a threat, is seen as, I mean, it really feels like, you know, I've got to hang on to these defenses or I die. I mean, that's the way it sometimes feels literally to us, you know, like, and that is the ego story, that we're going to die, you know. And so if we can just kind of slow down and again, go to that moment right now, you know, what am I really feeling? You know, am I feeling resentful? Am I feeling anxious? You know, in whatever, my feeling like it's never enough, you know, and it never works, and all the you know, because we sense that this isn't working, and so it brings up great, you know, this giving to get that we do, that we were talking about earlier, in all our gift giving and rushing around to please and seek approval, and so, you know, to just kind of slow down and be with that child that on some level, you know, knows it's not working. Right. And you know, be willing to kind of just be okay with that. Like Jesus knows that that's how we feel. Mm-hmm. You know,
as you're talking, yeah. Oh, I was going to say, as you're talking, a phrase that comes to mind is something that maybe Al Gore isn't credited enough with for helping us with this phrase of the inconvenient truth, and the fact that that, you know, if we're to look at the ego's insanity as something that is, you know, to use Ken words, you know, the maladaptive solution to the non-existent problem. But if we can see that it's not working, that's oftentimes the first step to you know, being, like you say, the vulnerability and the openness and the willingness to just look at it and to see how desolate and unfulfilling and unhappy we are as ego campers. then we can you know, choose against that, and then the other part of it that seems like it's crucially important is that it's a non-existent problem, but we only see that if we're willing to look at it and, you know, bring all those thoughts to the altar, and then with that, the light of that little Christ child basically within us shines it away. But it's only when we look at it. It's not like, oh, I'll get to that kind of thing, but it's being willing to see all the resistance, all the frustrations and anxieties and tensions moment to moment, and be mindful of them and see how invested we are in them. And with that awareness, that's when they dissolve, because we realize, oh, there's nothing there. But if we keep them in the dark and don't look at them, then they just continue to fester and propagate and resurface in different forms and all that kind of stuff.
And the feelings can, you know, I mean, it's never about trying to fix or change what we're doing.
Right.
What we're actually doing with our defenses, because we do what we do to thinking, robotically thinking we can protect ourselves, but we want to become aware of what we're doing, and then to not judge ourselves, to be, again, to invite in that child that is our defenselessness and never judges us for what we're doing. And so, again, like, Jesus is okay with whatever we're doing. He knows we're afraid, and he wants us to be okay with it too. It's not the form that's the problem. And so the watching with, can I just read from 303 a little bit about the looking?
Sure, of course.
It starts out by, so the lesson 303 is the Holy Christ is born in me today. And it starts by saying, watch with me, angels, watch with me today. Let all God's holy thoughts surround me and be still with me while heaven's son is born. And, it's really just stepping back with Jesus, and the angels that are in the Course are the thoughts of God, the thoughts, the right mind, our right-minded thoughts. So really to watch the ego with the right mind, which means to watch it with love, to watch it with defenselessness.
Right.
Because it's not it's not a sin.
Yeah. To hold back from the self-condemning thoughts that said, oh, you messed up again. I think I'll beat you up again, self. And instead of doing that, we just say, oh yeah, I can see where I was doing that. Well, and watching it even in mid-sentence or in mid, act, whatever the manifestation seems to be, but just looking at it, like you say, without judgment or condemnation. And that frees us up to make a different choice.
Right, and not really holding them back, because we don't want to try to struggle with it. That's what that's the ego getting involved. But really to just watch them. Watch with me. So honest about what we're feeling, but not, and without trying to fix or change, or let yourself be okay with how you're feeling. Try not to let it rip at someone, right. but to just sort of be tender toward that frightened child, that's within me and within all of us, and pay attention to, when I'm pointing a finger at someone else, it's the frightened child, the same frightened child in me that's in them. It's victim and victimizer are identical. The worst, and we've had some pretty great examples of extreme victimization in the last, month and a half. Just that we're particularly, seem to happen in our Western world, mm-hmm. And they're happening all over the place all the time. But so as those feelings come up, and whenever we're pointing a finger at another, and we're again distancing ourselves from I'm the innocent one and they're the guilty one, trying to play the face of innocence, which is the Course calls it, which is what we all do to try to prove we exist, but it's not our fault, it's someone else's. That's the ego's agenda. Right. When that's coming up too, that too, which also always leaves us feeling ultimately unsatisfied. We may feel momentary relief from the guilt, but then the guilt rebounds more strongly. To just stop and try to catch ourselves and really see if we can connect. I think what these lessons are about, and what a lot of chapter 15 is about, connect with that frightened child within us all, and remember the other child that can be born in us right now in the holy instant, that is the child of our defenselessness, and cradles every victim and victimizer, cradles every frightened soul, out there, mm-hmm. and doesn't see the differences that we make so important, the hierarchy of illusions that we cling to try to prove our stories, right. That this really happened. That's all part of the ego thought system, but it's all a lie. Yeah. Ken always said, you believe 100% of this Course, or you believe none of it. You have to, and of course we don't swallow it all at a time, but in terms of the thought systems, the thought system of the ego is completely, when we're in it, and the thought system of the Holy Spirit is completely outside it. And so, we have a split mind and we go back and forth, but we are the decision-making mind. So we have a choice. in any moment. And what informs us that we have a choice, what should be the red flag that we have a choice, is how am I feeling? You know, that's always the first step. And you know, at this, I mean, we can be tender with ourselves. We can be loving with ourselves through this process. And it's not to judge ourselves when we find ourselves judging a terrorist or judging the terrorist in our personal life, you know?
Right.
It's that's not what it's about.
Yeah, and that's often a good clue. It's when we're identifying with paradigms or ideas that basically paint black and white, good guys, bad guys, white hats, black hats, kind of scenarios and dichotomies. And you know, even if it's on a more subtle level, if it's just you know, just a glance askance of, like, you know, why are they doing that, you know? And then at that moment, if we can catch ourselves, you know, demonizing the demonizers, even if it's not somebody directly, but maybe even indirectly, you know, making condemnations or judgments about people that classify people. One of my favorite sort of Zen koans that went around the office, I think I mentioned this before, it was in the days when Murphy's laws were circulated on photocopy machines rather than email. My favorite was Garth's distinction, which goes, there are two types of people in the world: those who divide people into two types and those who don't.
Perfect.
But
right?
that's an example of, you know, how the Holy Spirit can help us look at ego's duality and just laugh at it. Because, I mean,
well, to that, let's, you know, I kept hearing these two songs throughout as I was preparing for this Christmas retreat that I had done in the beginning of December. And then just since then, you know, because Christmas is, the holidays are upon us, and you know, everywhere you go, into a Starbucks or into, you know, I've managed to stay out of a lot of department stores this year, but you know, you're still hearing constantly streamed Christmas music. And I was laughing because the two songs that I kept hearing, which I think I don't even remember thinking about them, the lyrics before, you know, but Santa Claus is coming to town. Okay, can I just read you a little bit? Sure. I won't sing it, thank God. But you better watch out. You better not cry. Better not pout. I'm telling you why. Santa Claus is coming to town. He's making a list and checking it twice. He's going to find out who's naughty and nice. Santa Claus is coming to town. And here's the really comforting part to children.
Sounds more like the Grim Reaper already.
He sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows if you've been bad or good. So be good, for goodness sake. So we threaten children on this. And then, okay, I'm getting nothing for Christmas. I'm getting nothing for Christmas because I ain't been nothing but bad. I broke my bat on Johnny's bed. Somebody snitched on me. I had a frog in sister's bed. Somebody snitched on me. I spilled some ink, and it goes on. And then it's, you know, it's about, I'm getting nothing for Christmas. Mommy and daddy are mad. I'm getting nothing for Christmas because I ain't been nothing but bad. You know? So,
I think I might have heard that one. I almost forgot about that song, but anyway, yeah. But
that's one from our childhood, probably, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, it's playing all over the place again.
Oh, okay. Oh.
It's been revived. But you know, those that's the ego thought system. It's always one or the other, and it's always, you know, it's always we try to earn people's love through being good, through getting approval, by being socially appropriate, you know, by pretending that everything's okay, and you know, it's all a lie. And you know, go ahead.
I was gonna say, those songs sound like department store terrorism to me. I mean, you know, if you think of the undercurrent and the psyche of what's really being, you know, foisted, you know, by someone outside of ourselves, running music. Yeah, right.
Right. But I mean, it's no different. It's just another form of what we're always doing, you know.
Right.
And so being good and staying out of their parents' way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's inherent in the ego thought system. I mean, children already know that when they come in. As Ken always said that children come in with full-blown egos. It's not the tabula rasa idea.
Right.
And so we're all, the point is that we're all doing this, and it is good if we can bring some levity to it, because it's insane.
Oh, absolutely.
What we're doing.
Absolutely.
It is a maladaptive solution, as Ken, you were quoting Ken, wonderful phrase, for a non-existent problem. But it feels very real.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's such an incredibly skillful performance that we all do. And we're so immersed in our roles that we forget that, there's that clapboard, that could come down and say, okay, cut, end of scene, anytime that we wait for the silence again, that basically that takes us out of the dramatic role that we're playing and moves us back into the theater, so we can, like you say in a lot of your writing, hold Jesus' hand and say, okay, let's look at this together and gently laugh at it, not in any kind of derisive way, but just say, oh yeah, I can see where I was playing into that role again and identifying with it, rather than just stepping back and seeing that it's just silly. It's just silly. Like, I love how Ken says it's not sinful, evil, or wicked. It's just silly. But we think that we're the home of evil, darkness, and sin, as that workbook lesson starts out.
Yeah. And that's where, and again, that's, the result of taking Jesus's hand.
Right.
And being in relationship with him and in conversation. I mean, I think of it as conversation, although it's, as I pointed out in my writing, I mean, it's very obvious. It's a monologue, really, because he has very little to say, except like, have you read the book?
Right.
But he doesn't judge us when we're in the middle of a meltdown. And so it's really to use whatever symbol works for you, but to be in some sort of relationship with that presence that is ego-free in our mind and doesn't judge us, and that is being symbolized with all this Christmas imagery as the child of our defenselessness. And in fact, I mean, in the way Jesus presents himself most of the time in the Course is more like an older sibling, a wiser part of ourselves. And that we can turn to, that knows, that's grown up now, and knows that these wild childish fantasies are just fantasies. Mm-hmm. But that's the result. The smiling that he's always doing, metaphorically, my willingness to in my pain, in my defensiveness, turn to him and say, this is the way it looks to me, and we, I mean, in my writing, I come to Jesus in usually some kind of complete hissy fit, over something, and so and try to spin it my way. Try to, we start usually by trying to get Jesus to join with us somehow, and against them,
right?
Which is impossible, I mean, we're trying to have him see it our way. But through that conversation, what always ends up happening is, and that just reflects, the writing just reflects a much longer process, believe me, of what's really the way it really works. But the end product of that is we laugh,
right?
And we laugh gently. We don't laugh. I used to think when Ken would say, don't take it so seriously, that I should be like, in hysterics over this. And I don't find that that's the case. It's much more of a gentle, oh, I was wrong. This really is just, this is so funny. I mean, it's just silly and it's all okay. There's a great comfort in it. It's not at all, it's not at anyone's expense, including my own.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, if it's at anyone's expense, then we know that we're barking up the wrong tree, because that means that
changed hands.
Yeah, we've picked up the sword again and said, oh, okay, let's get the authority problem issues going, and usually the abandonment, it's like, oh, mommy and daddy, abandoned me, for then the ego's, puerile perspective of thinking that somehow there's going to be a judgment day that involves bloodshed, at least, if not, outright Holocaust, and
Yeah.
we need to protect ourselves from that, in ego's paranoid thought system.
No,
And
I mean,
you said a full-blown hissy fit, and I was thinking, well, is there any other kind, in truth, if
no,
there's no order of difficulty in miracles?
no,
So
when you're in it, you're in it. Yeah,
yeah, so
exactly.
all of ego's tantrums are equally insane, no matter how seemingly trivial the cause or the degree of upset, supposedly.
And the practice of this, as you know, of trying to be vigilant for this is for how I'm feeling and what my reactions are, which is what the Course is asking us to pay attention to, reveals to us over time that what the Course is saying is true, that there's no difference between, a minor twinge of annoyance and the thought of murder.
Right.
And it also reveals to us that, the thought of murder is pretty much prevalent all the time in our thoughts, I mean, if we could all get away with it, we most, people would, because it's always, we feel that angry,
Which is basically another way of saying that we're all terrorists, and
Right.
we all need to be kept out of the country.
Right. Well, it is. I mean, the truth is, we're always trying to, again, distance ourselves, project it out,
Right.
and then make draw some kind of line in the sand, in a place that provides no protection. I mean, this is a fantasy world of duality, in which, I mean, yes, it's an illusion, but the Course says, can thoughts, are thoughts dangerous? Well, to bodies, yes.
Oh,
They are, but bodies do very bad things to each other here. But the point is that it's all coming from that same frightened place. And if we can, that same frightened child, and if we can begin to entertain the possibility to get in touch with the frightened child within us, when our emotions are getting triggered and we think it's somebody else's fault, and become defensive. And open to the possibility that maybe that's going on in the same way in the other person, and that we can't really see that by ourselves. That's why we need to take Jesus's hand. That's why we need to invite in the child of our defenselessness to be beside us, to have, to look with us, because it's not the way we start seeing it. Our initial assessment of the threat is always that it's a very real threat, and it's in them, not me, and so but the only healing happens in the mind, in which we begin to see that we can't see there's no threat until we see it the way we see it, and then see it the way Jesus sees it, which is that it's the same frightened child.
Mm-hmm.
And then ultimately we see that nothing happened. But that's the interim step. Before we can see oneness, Ken always said, we have to see our sameness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that comes through inviting in this part of our mind, this loving teacher that's always within us, that knows that.
The sameness word triggered a reminder of seeing a cartoon recently that I thought was really telling. And it shows sort of a Crusade era medieval two armies massed against each other, in a field of battle.
The Monty Python kind of thing.
Well, yeah, that sort of thing. But this wasn't a Monty Python specifically. I'll digress from my usual Python-esque allusions. But anyway, these two armies, with all their swords and shields and everything. One of the armies had all the flags look like ducks, and it was just like what's that?
Like quack quack ducks?
Yeah, quack quack ducks. Yeah, exactly. And it was an outline, a line art drawing of a duck face, and then they were, that was basically what they're fighting over, was the symbol, and then the other army had rabbits, but if you turned the symbol just a little bit, it was the exact same shape, but depending on how you looked at it, either looked like a duck or a rabbit's head. But I thought, what a what a great metaphor. It's kind of like, well, now I will lapse into a Monty Python one where
It
in
sounds
life
like Monty Python.
in Life of Brian, there's the scene in the Colosseum, which might have mentioned this because it's one of my favorites before. But
I love that movie. Yeah.
They're sitting around in the Colosseum watching some horrific spectacle, no doubt, and the conspirators against the Romans are clustered up high up in the bleachers, and then across from them is this lone individual, but they're talking for a while and about their group called the People's Front of Judea, and then they say, if I'm getting this right, but that person over there is the Judean People's Front, and then they all yell splitter, like, again, it's kind of a reminder that the form again has triumphed over the content, and the name, even though they're doing the same thing for the same purpose, it's the People's Front of Judea instead of the Judean Front.
Breaking up just a little bit, so you might want to just repeat that what they were yelling and what they said.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was having the same issue with the audio too, so I was just hoping to get the gist of what you were saying earlier. But it was the Judean People's Front versus the People's Front of Judea. So it's the same content, but the form was slightly different. But what a great metaphor for how we're really all wanting to do the same thing, but we make spectacularly impressive differences into an elevated art form in this world, with the degree of specialization and differences that we seem to manifest in terms of our bodies, our gender roles, our political scenarios, our economic situations, the nationalities, and then of course there's interspecies stuff. I mean, you can if there's a way of dividing things, we've figured it out. We keep splitting things. Splitter. We keep dividing and splitting. Double toil and trouble. It's the ego's maxim to keep dividing and fragmenting and turning it into another war. If one war starts looking like it's going to dry up, we got to, if all the world is becoming one, well, then we got to find another division to make war with it. And there's countless ways that we can bypass, do the spiritual bypass of thinking, well, all I have to do is just find some external thing and ignore the internal turmoil, and we'll fix the dream. We'll put the dream repair hat on. So anyway,
we'll fix the dream, or we'll just bury the. We won't look. I mean, I think a lot of times we really don't. We're not really looking because we're not being honest about what we're feeling.
Right.
And we really can't skip that step. It won't work, because what is denied is repressed, and it will be projected. So the only way, if the Course, there are other paths, clearly, and the Course says it doesn't claim to be the only path, but if you are a student of A Course in Miracles and really resonate with what the Course's direction is, then there's no way around going through, going through the clouds of darkness. You don't want to, you can't do that alone. You need Jesus's hand. This is making you, because as our teacher, Jesus's only way to motivate us is to get us to begin to contrast the way we're feeling when we're identified with our specialness and trying to prove a lie that we exist, but it's not, apart from God.
Right.
And then blame it on someone else. That's our defense. He's trying to get us to contrast that with the holy instant.
Yes.
With him, and beginning to build a relationship with him and make that the most important thing, and make our lives a classroom. And then having those moments that are born again of that practice, in which we have the aha moment that this, it's all okay. It's all okay. This has, and that's outside of time and space. And that's a piece that defies understanding in this world. It's not, as Ken said about this lesson 303, when he's talking about watch with me angels and the Holy Christ is born in me today. And all of those ideas of stillness. It's not a stillness of the world that the lesson is talking about, that Jesus is talking about. It's that stillness, it's that quiet center within the mind.
Right.
And, you know, again, he's always addressing us as a decision-making mind, not as an individual personal self.
Which is
Although, I mean,
such
that's
an important point, isn't it? Because it is, if we can remember to look at the Course and sort of have, you know, laser engraved on our retinas, so that everywhere we look on any page of the Course, this is about the mind, then it starts to make sense. Because otherwise, if we think of it as about, you know, the Bruce or the Susan or the other, you know, whatever personality you think you are, if you're watching this video, then, you know, all bets are off, and we're, you know, again, off on the wrong tangent again.
and I think that's right. And I think that so a reader, he's really not addressing the reader, he's addressing the decision-making mind. He's
Right.
It was otherwise and became the decision maker that chose between the ego or the Holy Spirit. But I mean, I know for myself, I grasped that, and I grasped pretty early on that intellectually, but then, you know, if I'm really honest with myself, I don't understand that. We can't understand that until we're awake. So, you know, or until we're in the real world and at the top of the ladder, as Ken would say, you know, and no longer identify with a personal self. But we can want to learn that, and we can turn to the presence in our mind that does grasp it. And that's why the whole direction of this is always taking us back, you know, trying an important thing. And, you know, when we do that, I'm sorry, one of those days. But you know, that's the direction. I mean, we really have to cultivate that relationship with Jesus, because, or whatever symbol works for you. Although, I mean, Jesus is the symbol. Jesus, Holy Spirit are the, you know, interchangeable symbols that the Course uses. And Jesus is presented as our teacher, largely to correct the mistaken comprehension of Jesus, of the Jesus that we, you know, the biblical Jesus that was dualistic, that was you know, had an ego.
And what a gift that is, true, because there's so many corrections to formal Christianity in A Course in Miracles that are I find really helpful, that because so many of us have been exposed either directly or indirectly, just through osmosis in our culture, to that Judeo-Christian, you know, gestalt of thinking.
Right, it isn't, culturally at least, yeah.
That the fact that the Course in hundreds of places provides an alternative understanding or correction to a lot of the things that are just assumed as to be correct. If we've grown up with that kind of cultural programming, whether it's looked at or, you know, consciously and examined or not, it's really, I think, eye-opening to just go back through and see how many places we're given an opportunity to see things through a different light that is really a non-dual option that
Right.
you know, dispels the cult of personality, as Ken puts it. And he's not condemning Christianity as you know, in isolation. He's basically saying that all formal religions, you know, I like how Jesus says this, you know, something to the effect, I think it's in the psychotherapy pamphlet maybe, or Song of Prayer, one of the supplements. I think it says something like, you know, Christianity has no place in religion, but it has something no place in formal religion, something like that anyway. But it was basically that no formal religion has any place, maybe that's what it is, you know, in the work that we're really doing, only because once you formalize something, you're attached and identified with the form rather than the content. I think I totally blew that citation, but and paraphrased it best. But that was the gist of what I got from it, was that if you look for the content in the mind, and you know, continually, gently, firmly, you know, bring yourself back to the content of the mind, like you say, to look at it without condemnation, and to not stuff the feelings or not bury the thoughts, but to just put them out there on the altar of you know, the Holy Spirit's examination table, brightly lit, then they dissolve.
That idea, you know, of in Christmas as the end of sacrifices, the sign of Christmas is a star, a light in darkness, see it not outside yourself. And formal religions are always an attempt to see it externally, to make it you know, an external search. And it's an even crazier attempt because it presents a dualistic God, you know, that again, that we need to somehow purify ourselves to redeem ourselves for it makes sin very real, you know, for the original sin of eating an apple, you know. It got translated into that, and we were, you know, we turned the whole thing around, believing that we actually pushed heaven away. We turned the whole story around to say that we were abandoned by God and cast out of heaven because he recognized a real sin. And, you know, and so organized religions are attempts again to sacrifice ourselves, to try to and sacrifice others often, you know, the ones that don't want to be, you know, that still want to be sinful, to sacrifice them, all in the name of God. And I mean, the very story of Christmas is a story of Jesus being born to redeem all the rest of us from the very real sin, original sin of you know, being of the Adam and Eve, you know, of our ancestor, of actually, you know, sinning against God. And you know, and then the story gets worse, as we know, and you know, and goes on to this child would be born so that he could be killed, he could be sacrificed to make up, to compensate for that sin. And you know, it's just another, I mean, it's the primary example in our culture of sacrifice. But you know, the point is that we're doing it all the time. We're all sacrificing all the time to try to compensate for that guilt that we think is so real within us. And you know, that gets back to that frightened child again, that believed the story. It wasn't the tiny mad idea that had no consequences. You know, our life apart continues uninterrupted. But that's a terrifying thought to us, because what the hell does that mean? That's a formless life, you know. And the guilt is still, we believe that the scene of the crime is in the mind, and then what we're even more afraid of is disappearing into the love that you know, we have a nagging sense still exists, but we don't know what that means anymore, you know. So the only self that seems like safety to us is this puny defense, you know, the psychological and physical defense, and we'll die to defend it.
And I think that's what's tremendous brilliance and wisdom in the approach that the Course takes in the developmental process of using forgiveness to gradually help us release our identity investment in the ego's thought system over time, because we believe in time. We believe we're bodies, and you know, we've grown up with religions about bodies and exalting them. But we can turn, you know, the ego's prison, or maybe Colosseum, since we were using that metaphor earlier, in the sort of the Roman sense of gladiator spectacles and sacrifice, sometimes of the humankind. Turn that into a classroom instead, but it's a gradual process by looking at the insanity of that and gently forgiving ourselves, instance by instance, person by person, situation by situation, and seeing, you know, I've invested in a projection to attempt to evade from a crime that never happened. I can reel that back in, forgive myself, using that help that we all have from what we call the Holy Spirit, Jesus, you know, kindness teacher. The label is not important, but using that awareness, we then realize that nothing happened, and that the like you were saying, the love that we never left, that we think we're afraid of, is really what has drawn us to this work and to this study. And we think it's the individual people that are practicing this, but it's really the awareness that we all share as one being that is this inexorable call, this incredibly beautiful beyond any kind of words we could imagine, calling that is bringing us back to that awareness that we never left. But because we think we're afraid of it, we get the training wheel gradual approach of easing into it by forgiving a little bit at a time, seemingly. But we're
Right.
really eventually we'll take that last step, by getting out of the way completely and letting, as the Course puts it, God take the final step. But those interim ones, though, which may seem countless, but there's a finite number, are at least that's what I get from the Course, is that we sort of holographically heal things as we forgive archetypes, or we forgive patterns in our lives, and look at the aspects that come at us, for example, in different seasons, like the holiday season. We're recording this right now. But each one of those archetypes then becomes healed as we forgive ourselves for having invested our identity with the idea that somehow there's something outside of us that's good or bad, or that is, there's a we and a they, that there's a dualistic reality that we sort of take the unpaint brush and unpaint it. Or another metaphor that crossed my mind the other day is the old classic elephant in the room. Well, the ego is sort of the invisible elephant. And,
Mm-hmm.
and what we're doing with forgiveness is every time we forgive ourselves, we're taking a little bit of paint, and we're gray or whatever color, pastel if you like, rainbow color. It could be any color, but we're putting a little dab of paint on the elephant every time we forgive something. And eventually, instead of the elephant, we're bumping into it and bruising our shins and stubbing our toes on it every time we go into the room, we say, oh, well, there's, more of that elephant. And we eventually avoid running into the elephant and eventually leave the room altogether and find a better room, which is what I think what the Course suggests. We leave the desert, as Ken says.
We're learning that this is hurting us.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's really very simple. We don't have to, and really, again, it's kind of level confusion to think that we can really, as we're going through this, grasp all the metaphysics.
Right.
We know that intellectually, but it doesn't. It's not really in our day-to-day, moment-to-moment awareness,
Right.
And it doesn't have to. I mean, it really can't be, because that just brings us back again to, that's a way we can sometimes use that as a way to distance ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit. But it's that. I mean, but although we keep that in mind, you always want to keep the metaphysics in mind, as Ken said, and you pointed out so well. But on a very practical, moment-to-moment level, it's just, how am I feeling right now?
Right.
And if it's anything but kind and peaceful toward myself or others, then I took the hand of the ego. It's that elephant in the room, and I have another teacher, another hand that I can take, and another these angels that I can watch with. I have a right mind,
Mm-hmm.
and I can be real gentle and get in touch with that. This is the frightened child in me. I'm seeing it's always an outpicturing of the same frightened child, and that practice over time, even if we don't have any big aha moment, just begins to, we see it faster.
Mm-hmm.
We accept it more easily. We know that it's the way we want to go, even when we're scared. And we can have times where, even when we're in our deepest fear, there's an awareness that those angels, that Christ child has not abandoned us. It's still right there. I'm too afraid right now.
Mm-hmm.
And not judge ourselves and become patient. In the manual, characteristic of an advanced teacher of God is patience, because he knows the end is sure. And we get, we have that gradual development of trust that the manual also talks about. And that the way that develops is through the Holy Spirit's kind use of time that you were describing, by just using my day, using my classroom, using my curriculum, one reaction at a time, to heal my mind, to comfort that frightened child in all of us, and to not do it alone. But I think we should probably go to lesson 303 and read.
I was just thinking that because what you were just saying was reminding me to the rest of that
And
paragraph.
we've been going on quite a while, so we might want to conclude with a reading of this, and any commentary that we want to do. So,
Do you want to read where it starts? Let earthly sounds be quiet. So I think that's where we left off, isn't it?
Why don't I repeat the first part, and
Okay, sure.
Just because people might not have remembered.
Yeah.
So lesson 303, the Holy Christ is born in me today. Watch with me, angels, watch with me today. Let all God's holy thoughts surround me, and be still with me while heaven's Son is born. Let earthly sounds be quiet, and the sights to which I am accustomed disappear. So let them recede, right? I mean, the body's eyes still see. And again, the noisiness of our world is still there. Our ears still hear it, but there's another, in the mind, there's a quiet place that we can go to be still a moment and recognize, look at our fear with the child of our defenselessness with us, and accept that comfort, and see our sameness, see every frightened child, victim and victimizer. And that's the need of every heart. That's what we're trying to learn, and everybody so desperately wants to remember, is that, and doesn't believe, is that nothing I do has changed your love for me. I mean, it's God's love for me, but it's represented in everybody else out there.
Right. Right.
So, do you want to continue a little bit? And
I was just actually the audio that about Ken talking about this. I just made a note of something he said in relation to the "let earthly sounds be quiet" was, the raucous shrieks of the ego that is talked about in the Course. Right. And what Ken was describing is, the belief that the dream is dreaming us. I think that's stuck in my mind as a particularly interesting idea, and a helpful one too, because we think that the persona that we identify with is us, and what I think is again that gradual process of being more and more peaceful and patient and tolerant and quiet is allowing ourselves to just look at the insanity of the ego stuff, and just I like it. The quiet, I think, is sort of like turning down the volume, and that's the on the director's cut. There's two director's cut, using the DVD metaphor, and if we turn up our inner kindness teachers, aka Holy Spirits, aka Jesus of the Course, soundtrack, we're simultaneously turning down the ego's dirge track, and but the message still kind of like, it's still visible on the screen, maybe like a little ticker tape scrolling by, that that we can hear the shouting, but it's muted because we've turned it down to either to almost inaudible. We still hear, like you say, we're not denying the physicality, we're not denying the feelings, we're not denying the thoughts, we're just kind of watching them as if in a more meditative state, where we see that there's nothing to get hung about, as the Beatles would say.
Yeah. And we have that presence of love in our mind beside us. We're not doing it alone.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's, really all important. And then, it just fix or change. It's just to watch.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, and let it be, let it, let my fear be. But, and again, and also never always bring ourselves back from, it's whenever we're tempted to think that we're watching someone else's ego, there's no one else out there. So, it's always my own mind in need of healing that I'm watching. It's always the frightened child in me. That works for me to remind myself that it's not, it's the same. That's my frightened child right there,
Yep.
And so we become grateful over time to be shown that, because that's what brings us back. But, that's a good reminder, because it's not about, there's just one ego. There's just one frightened child, really.
Mm-hmm.
So
the little trembling kid that doesn't realize that there's another identity that's infinitely strong, infinitely peaceful, waiting to be remembered and restored.
Yeah. And that does, that over time, that really the empathy for others just spontaneously happens from that. It just,
we're all fighting the hard battle together, ethic. Yeah.
it came in the light of the quiet center, you know, of the non-judgmental mind. And so, you know, it isn't to mean that we don't start there. We certainly start there. That's you know, that's our default position. Help. We need to step back and watch with angels, with Jesus beside us, you know.
Right.
So, do you want to keep reading? So, and let Christ be welcome where he is.
Oh, sure. Sure. Let Christ be welcomed where he is at home, and let him hear the sounds he understands, and see but sights that show his Father's love. Let him no longer be a stranger here, for he is born in me today. And there's that seeming prodigal self that we thought, you know, had left perfect oneness, but never happened.
It's a beautiful echo again of lesson 182, and you know, it just invites us to cradle this child, you know, that of our defenselessness, and give him just a moment to be himself, you know, where he is not at home. And it says all those lovely things, and it you know, it implies that he's suffocating here, and of course, you know, he's invulnerable. We're suffocating here. We're suffocating each other with this you know, the oppressiveness of the guilt that we think that we nurture, you know, in our relationships, and with all our special relationship bargains. And so, you know, this Christmas, if we could really make our purpose watching with angels, that, you know, what would it be like to just allow some of the neediness, just some, you know, just here and there, as I notice it, to go, the expectations of myself and others, the you know, the striving to please, and to just really try to see the same frightened child in everyone, victim and victimizer, and you know, I mean, in our larger world and in our personal world, you know, because in our personal worlds over the holidays, it seems we're in much more contact usually with our special relationships, and so, you know, and we're expected to feel great, and we don't. You know, so use that as a way to heal, as a way to comfort, as a way to return to, you know, to really open to Jesus's answer, to the Course's answer of our defenselessness, and you know, that Jesus loves us and is okay with us no matter what, you know, no matter what. And we can reflect that if we can even have a few still moments with that awareness, it will be reflected on some level to everyone, you know.
Right. And like you say, it's the specifics that we have the opportunity to see that, and without those specifics, we'd be, you know, short-circuiting our classroom and bypassing the golden opportunities we really have to, you know, look at the contents of our unconscious mind that seem to be out there. And we have these wonderful actors that are on our payroll that we've hired, that we call others. Like you say, and the holidays are a great time to practice it, to just see how perfectly we have an opportunity to make it about the other person, to be kind, and also to notice and watch and forgive ourselves when we withhold those kindnesses, or we make it about ourselves, you know, and just, you know, just see if we can, you know, navigate through another season and suspend maybe a little more judgment and a little more condemnation, and just, you know, treat what seems to be the world outside of ourselves a little more kindly by seeing that we're all the same. There is no difference, and we're all
right. And give the Holy Spirit everything that we think would hurt us.
Yeah.
As we're feeling hurt.
Yep.
That's the is to go back to that quiet center with Jesus and just say, you know, I this hurts. I really want to see differently. So I'm going to continue with the last paragraph. The last paragraph is sort of more like a prayer. And we might want to, we've gone quite a while. We might want to just conclude with this. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely. Certainly.
So your son is welcome, Father. He has come to save me from the evil self I made. He is the self that you have given me. He is but what I really am in truth. He is the son you love above all things. He is my self, capital S self, as you created me. It is not Christ that can be crucified. Safe in your arms, let me receive your son. So,
That's it. That's the eternal embrace that we never left, that we all have an opportunity to welcome with each little act of kindness or shared interest or forgiveness that we remember to practice. So anyway,
right. And each time we're feeling whatever we're feeling this Christmas, to just let it, to be honest about it and feel it and say, this hurts. I really would like to heal my mind about it. So, and then just let it happen. It's whatever happens, happens. It's okay. It's all okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a perfect Christmas. It's not about the form.
And then we can apply that throughout the year too. Yeah. Just like Halloween, if we get the take-home lesson of Halloween that we're, in costume 365 days a year, we can also take the take-home lesson of Christmas that it's about remembering that Christ child throughout the year. Yeah. Moment to moment. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Susan. And again, I've been talking with Susan Dugan. This is Bruce Rawles. And you can read more of Susan's writing on foraysandforgiveness.com. And I've got some other course-related material on acimblog.com. And we look forward to talking again. Thanks.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.